Hi, this is Chris Brown, and I have the long anticipated but ultimately underwhelming I-9 form. Well, we've all been waiting for months now for the USCIS to issue an updated I-9 form, not because we're so excited about new I-9 forms, but because the old one has been expired since August 31st of 2019. And ever since it expired, we get constant questions here about where's the new form? Why don't we have the new form? Why aren't we using the new form? In fact, just last week, one of our clients that we were helping with some onboarding packets asked why weren't we incorporating the new I-9 form in their onboarding packets? Why were we using this old expired version? And well, that's because as of last week, we still didn't have a new version. It wasn't until Friday the 31st of January, the year 2020, that we got the long-awaited, identical but new date I-9 form. And it is basically the same form. The form itself, no major changes, just kind of as we expected. Old format, new dates. There are some changes to the instructions, and I will point out some things in that. The 15-page instructions that come, well, they don't come with the I-9, but are downloadable from USCIS to help you complete the I-9. There are some clarifications in there that are helpful, but ultimately the form itself is basically the old form. Now, as I mentioned, the old form had an expiration date of August 31st of 2019. It expired, and at first there was just nothing. And then USCIS did put something on the website indicating that, oh, until we come out with a new form, keep using the old one. The revision date on the new form, and I know this is going to stress some people out, because the revision date on the new form is October 21st, 2019. So I guarantee there are going to be some companies out there that when these new forms come out, look at that revision date and they say, oh my gosh, there's been a new form out for months and we've been using the wrong form. Go back and change all the I-9 forms. Well, going back and changing all the I-9 forms is seldom a good idea. But yes, that's the revision date because that seems to be based upon when the Office of Management and Budget approved the form, but we haven't seen it until January 31st of 2020. And in fact, you can keep using the old expired form up until April 30th, 2020, at which point employers must switch over to the new form. So don't freak out. Don't go back and try and update and change old I-9 forms because you're afraid that you were using the wrong version. You're not allowed to do that anyway. But the new version didn't come out until January 31st of 2020. And as I mentioned, you're allowed to continue even using the expired one until April 30th. Now, also as a reminder, because this always comes up, when a new version of the form comes out, some employers somewhere think, oh, there's a new form, let me go and have everybody complete a new form. No, that's never the way the law has worked. The form is completed one time for the employee, and that's at the point of hire, unless their documents expire and you need to use a new form because you don't have any room left to update their documents. Otherwise, you do not go back and have people who are still working for you complete a new I-9 form. It's just for new hires. So just use the new form going forward, and you actually have until April 30th to implement the new form. Why until April 30th? Well, if you're just using paper forms, which is most employers, you can start using it right away. It's just like the old form, no special training, really simple to use. But there are companies that have some sort of a HRIS system or some method of having people onboard electronically where their information gets placed onto an I-9 form. And people who build those systems or update those systems need time to integrate the new form. They can't just turn it on immediately, even when it basically looks the same. And that's why we have that extended period of time to implement it. But if you're just printing off paper copies, just start printing off the new one. Make your life easier. Now, there is a fillable PDF version of the I-9 form, which you are allowed to have employees fill out, but in most circumstances, once they fill it out, you're gonna have to print it off and have them put a wet signature on the form and retain that paper copy. So it doesn't really do a tremendous amount of good. Although they did make some updates to that electronically fillable PDF form to update some countries and change the way a couple of fields worked. But once again, it's still basically the same form. No big changes. Now, in the instructions, there are some little tweaks and clarifications in the instructions which I think are useful. One of the things that's in the instructions now is it clarifies who can be authorized representatives for an employer. And it's really the same answer we've been giving people for decades. Anyone can be your authorized representative if you authorize them. And employers have often been concerned, especially with remote hires, well, who am I going to have fill out this form in this other state? Well, basically it can be practically anyone. You shouldn't have it be the employee who's filling out Section 1. That would look bad if they were filling out Section 1 and Section 2 on themselves, but essentially just about anyone else. And so for a long time, employers have used notary publics or someone like that who they feel they can trust to review the documents and fill it out. I can tell you from experience that notaries sometimes are uncomfortable doing it because they're not familiar with the form, but if you look online, there are some who are used to filling out I-9s and are willing to do it for you. But basically, you can have anyone act as your authorized representative, just as has been the case for many years. You're just liable for what they do. And the instructions now clarify that. The other useful tidbit in the instructions that kind of makes me happy is they've clarified what you're supposed to do in Section 2 if someone gives you a List A document with columns B and C, or if they give you List B and C documents with column A. Now, employers have been stressed for quite some time because many companies have been fined fairly significant amounts by USCIS because of paperwork violations on I-9 forms. And a lot of the times those paperwork violations have boiled down to missing data, empty fields. And especially since they've increased the amount they can fine you per violation, it's kind of scary. If you look at how many lines there are in Section 2, if someone's just giving you a List A document, like all of column B and C are empty, well, could that be a penalty for each one of those empty lines? So what a lot of employers do is they just put an NA for not applicable on every line that they're not filling out. And they've come out now and clarified that if someone provides a List A document and the employer completes column A, you can just leave B and C blank and you do not have to put in an NA on each line. And the reverse is also true. If they provide a List B and List C document, you can just leave List A blank and without putting in the not applicable on every line. Just to be clear, I'm just talking about that section. You still have to worry about stuff in Section 1 being blank and potentially having violations there, or if you didn't fill out other parts of Section 2 correctly. So it's still very important that the form be completed correctly. And if you look at the 15 pages of instructions, which I know it's ironic, there's 15 pages of instructions for a 2-page form, but if you look at the 15 pages of instructions, in most cases they tell you what to do instead of leaving a field blank, but there was some ambiguity when it came to Section 2 of the form. So I think that's helpful that we have that information, and that will reduce the NAing that otherwise employers would be doing, save them some ink and some handwriting, maybe some joint pain in their hands. The other thing that's new, or at least new to me, I've never seen it before, is we have this new form that has now appeared, which is a special certification statement for if you use more than one preparer translator in completing Section 1. And so we've got this new document here, which if it existed before, I never saw it. If you have multiple preparer translators helping out on a form. Now I've got to tell you, I've looked at thousands and thousands of I-9 forms over the past 20 years, and I've never run across one where somebody needed multiple preparer translators. In fact, the vast majority of forms are completed with no preparer and translator. But I imagine there was some situation where there were multiple preparer translators involved, and as a result, they've come out with this supplement form. But I imagine for most employers, you will seldom, if ever, be using that new document because it just isn't necessary. So that's it. Long time to get what is essentially the same form. Not very exciting, but not very exciting is good. In 2020, we're still helping a lot of people figure out how to fill out that new W-4 form, which has them confused enough. So I'm pretty content with not having a totally revamped I-9 form and just having updated dates, although it would have kind of been nice if we would have had it a little bit closer to when the previous form expired. But as I mentioned before, it just seems that they're not very good at doing that. And so I imagine in 2022, when this newer version of the I-9 form is set to expire, we'll probably be having similar conversations about where is the new form, and we'll probably have just about the same answer.